Hi there. Have you ever thought that the people who could hurt you the most might actually be your own family? My name is Emma Rodriguez, and at 26, I thought the hardest part of my life was raising a child alone after my family turned their backs on me with the words, "You don't even have a family." But that was nothing compared to what came next. The same relatives who abandoned me showed up years later smiling at my doorstep, only to secretly forge my signature and try to steal the house my grandmother left me. That was the day I realized the people we call family can sometimes be the greatest danger. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, we seemed like your typical American family from the outside. My dad, Robert, worked as a construction engineer, always coming home covered in dust with blueprints tucked under his arm. My mom, Linda, taught third grade at the local elementary school, the kind of teacher who kept apple-shaped erasers in her desk drawer and knew every kid's birthday by heart. Then there was my older brother, Marcus, 5 years my senior, and absolutely everything my parents had ever dreamed of in a son. We lived in a sprawling ranch house with 4 bedrooms and a pool that my dad had installed himself one summer when I was 12. The house always smelled like my mom's lavender candles and whatever casserole she was experimenting with that week. It should have been perfect. But even as a kid, I could feel the invisible scales that seemed to measure everything I did against everything Marcus accomplished. Marcus was the golden child in every sense of the word. When he brought home C's and D's in high school, my parents celebrated his effort. When I brought home straight A's, it was just expected. When Marcus decided he wanted to study engineering at MIT, my parents liquidated their retirement savings to make it happen. When I expressed interest in psychology and art therapy, my mom literally laughed and said, "Honey, whenever you have time to dream about a far-fetched career, it would be more reasonable to find a rich husband." It's 2025, not 1925. But my mother's ideas about a woman's life are older than some of the antique dolls she collects. The one person who saw things differently was my grandmother Rose, my mom's mother. Grandma Rose lived about 2 hours away in Denver, in this beautiful Victorian house she'd bought in the 1970s for practically nothing. Every summer, while Marcus went to expensive engineering camps that my parents somehow found the money for, I spent 3 weeks with Grandma Rose, learning to tend her garden and listening to stories about her life as a single mother after my grandfather died young. "Strong women build their own foundations, honey," she used to tell me while we planted tomatoes in her backyard garden. "Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to live your life." Grandma Rose had worked as a seamstress to support 3 kids on her own, and she'd managed to put all of them through at least some college. She understood what it meant to fight for your dreams when everyone else thought they were too big for someone like you. The tension in my family reached a breaking point during my senior year of high school when college applications were due. My parents had already decided my future. I would study education, become a teacher like my mom, find a nice stable husband, and settle down close to home. When I told them I wanted to study psychology at the University of Colorado Boulder, specifically to become a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma, you would have thought I announced I was joining a cult. "Psychology is not a real career, Emma," my dad said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "It's a hobby for rich people who don't need to worry about paying bills." My mom nodded along. "Teaching is respectable, stable. You'll always have work, good benefits, summers off for your future children." But I'd already fallen in love with the idea of helping kids who felt as invisible and misunderstood as I often did. I'd volunteered at a crisis hotline during my senior year, and something about being able to listen to people who were struggling and help them find their way through darkness felt like my calling. When my acceptance letter to CU Boulder arrived, along with a partial scholarship for my grades, I thought surely my parents would see that this was meant to be. Instead, my dad just shook his head and said, "If you want to waste your money on art therapy or whatever nonsense you're calling it, you're on your own." Marcus, home from MIT for the weekend, smirked from across the dinner table. "Maybe you should listen to Dad, Em. Not everyone is cut out for a real career that requires actual intelligence." I still remember the way my mom's fork clinked against her plate when she set it down, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. She didn't defend me. She just stared at her meatloaf like it held the answers to life's biggest questions. That night, I made my decision. I was going to Boulder, with or without their support. College was tough financially, but I made it work with scholarships, student loans, and a part-time job at a campus coffee shop. I came home for holidays, but the visits were always tense. Every conversation felt like a test I was destined to fail. My parents would ask pointed questions about my major, my grades, my job prospects, while simultaneously bragging about Marcus's internships at prestigious engineering firms. Marcus just got accepted for a summer program at NASA, my mom would announce over Thanksgiving dinner, as if NASA was personally calling our house to offer congratulations. Meanwhile, my accomplishments, making Dean's List, getting published in the University Psychology Journal, being selected for a competitive internship at a teen crisis center, were met with polite nods and immediate subject changes. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology when I was 22, then stayed for my master's in counseling psychology. By the time I finished my education, I was 24 years old, $40,000 in student loan debt, and barely speaking to my family beyond obligatory holiday phone calls. That's when I met Jake. Jake was everything my parents probably would have approved of if they'd bothered to meet him. He was 26, worked in finance, drove a BMW, and had the kind of confident smile that made me believe maybe I could have both the career I wanted and the love story I dreamed about. We dated for 2 years, and I genuinely thought he was the one. He seemed supportive of my career goals, proud even. When I got my first real job as a counselor at a clinic in Denver, making $35,000 a year, he took me out to celebrate. When I started building my private practice on the side, seeing teenage clients in the evenings and weekends, he would bring me dinner and joke about being a therapy widower. Everything changed when I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. I was 26. We'd been talking about marriage, and part of me was actually excited despite the timing not being perfect. I imagined Jake's face lighting up, imagined us planning our future together, maybe even getting married before the baby came. Instead, Jake stared at the test like it was a death sentence. "Emma, I can't do this," he said, sinking onto my couch like his legs had given out. "I'm not ready to be a father. I'm not ready for all of this." "All of what?" I asked, though I was starting to understand. The responsibility, the money, the whole domestic thing. "I'm 28, Emma. I'm just getting my career started." The conversation that followed was probably one of the most painful of my life up to that point. Jake laid out all the reasons why having a baby would ruin both our lives. How I'd have to quit my practice, how we'd be broke, how it wasn't fair to bring a child into the world when we weren't established yet. "There are options," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes, but I already knew, sitting there listening to him list all the ways my baby would inconvenience his life, that I wasn't going to terminate this pregnancy. Something fierce and protective had awakened in me the moment I saw that positive test, and Jake's reaction only made it stronger. "I'm keeping the baby," I said. Jake nodded like he'd expected as much. "Then I can't stay, Emma. I'm sorry, but I can't be part of this." He moved out that weekend, taking his BMW and his 5-year plan and his dreams of uninterrupted career advancement. I never heard from him again, except for a text 3 months later asking me to remove him from my emergency contacts at work. Suddenly, I was 26, pregnant, and completely alone. That's when I made what might have been the hardest phone call of my life. Despite everything, despite the years of feeling like an afterthought in my own family, I called home. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice already shaking with tears I was trying to hold back. "I need help. I'm pregnant and alone, and I don't know what to do." The silence that followed stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Emma," she finally said, and I could hear my dad saying something in the background. "Hold on." I waited, listening to muffled conversation I couldn't quite make out, until my dad's voice came on the line. "Emma, you made your choices," he said in that flat, disappointed tone I remembered from childhood. "We warned you about this path you insisted on taking. Living alone in that expensive city, focusing on your career instead of finding a stable relationship." "Dad, please," I whispered. "I just need somewhere to stay until the baby comes. I can work, I can help around the house, I just need—" "We can't support irresponsible decisions," my mother's voice cut in. She'd gotten on the other extension. "You're a grown woman, Emma. You chose to have a relationship with someone who clearly wasn't committed to you, and now you're choosing to have a baby you can't afford." "I can afford it," I protested, though we all knew that wasn't entirely true. "I just need a little help getting on my feet." Marcus's voice suddenly joined the conversation. and I realized they'd called him over. Maybe this will teach you about consequences, Em. You always thought you knew better than everyone else. The three of them, my entire family, united against me in my moment of greatest need. You don't even have a family anymore, Emma, my dad said, his words hitting me like a physical blow. You made it clear years ago that you didn't need us. You're on your own. The line went dead, and I sat there in my tiny studio apartment, hand on my growing belly, crying until I couldn't breathe. That conversation happened on a Tuesday in March. On Friday of the same week, I got a call that changed everything again. Emma, honey, this is Mrs. Patterson, your grandma's neighbor. The voice was gentle, careful. I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but your grandmother Rose passed away this morning. She had a stroke in her sleep. I drove to Denver for the funeral in a daze, my morning sickness making the 2-hour drive even more miserable. When I arrived at the small chapel, I saw my parents and Marcus sitting in the front row, but none of them acknowledged me when I slipped into a pew near the back. After the service, during the reading of Grandma Rose's will, I learned that she'd left me something that would change my life forever. To my granddaughter Emma, the lawyer read, who has the strength to build her own family and the courage to follow her dreams. I leave my house at 1847 Maple Street in Denver, along with the contents of my savings account. The house, Grandma Rose's beautiful Victorian house with its wraparound porch and mature garden, was mine, along with $50,000 in savings that she'd somehow managed to accumulate over the years. My family's reaction was immediate and ugly. She barely visited Grandma the last few years, my mother hissed as we stood outside the lawyer's office. We took care of everything. This is ridiculous, Marcus added. Emma doesn't need a whole house to herself. She doesn't even have a real family, my dad was more direct. We'll be contesting this will. Mom wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. But the lawyer had already explained that Grandma Rose had updated her will just 6 months before she passed, and she'd been thoroughly assessed as mentally competent. The house and everything that came with it was legally mine. I moved into 1847 Maple Street when I was 7 months pregnant. The house needed some work, the heating system was ancient, and some of the plumbing needed updating, but it was solid, beautiful, and mine. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who'd called about Grandma Rose's passing, turned out to be a godsend. She was a retired nurse who'd been widowed 10 years earlier, and she immediately took me under her wing. When I went into labor at 2 a.m. on a cold December morning, she's the one who drove me to the hospital and held my hand while I brought Lily into the world. Lily Rose Rodriguez, named for my grandmother, was born healthy and perfect, with dark hair like mine and the most alert brown eyes I'd ever seen. Holding her for the first time, I made a promise that she would never feel unwanted or unsupported the way I had. The first few months of motherhood were challenging in ways I hadn't expected. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and sometimes terrified that I was doing everything wrong. But I was also determined to make it work. I started taking on remote counseling clients while Lily napped, slowly building my practice back up while learning how to be a mom. When Lily was 6 months old, I met David. I was at the pediatrician's office for one of Lily's checkups, juggling a crying baby, a diaper bag, and the paperwork I'd forgotten to fill out, when this voice behind me said, "Can I help with something?" I turned around to see a tall Asian American man in a white coat, probably about my age, with kind eyes and an easy smile. His name tag read, Dr. David Chen, Pediatrics. "I'm not your doctor," he said quickly, "but I noticed you looked like you could use an extra hand." That's how I met the man who would become my husband. Though I certainly wasn't thinking about romance at the time. I was thinking about how nice it was to have someone offer to help without expecting anything in return. David and I became friends first. He'd stop by the house sometimes when he was in the neighborhood, always with some excuse about checking on how we were settling in. He'd help me install the new car seat I'd bought but couldn't figure out, or hold Lily while I tried to fix a leaky faucet. He never made me feel like a charity case, or like I should be grateful for his attention. He just showed up. It wasn't until Lily's first birthday party, a small gathering in Grandma Rose's garden with Mrs. Patterson, a few neighbors, and David, that I realized what was happening between us. David had spent the morning helping me set up decorations, and when Lily took her first real steps across the grass, reaching for him with chocolate cake smeared across her face, He scooped her up and spun her around like she was his own child. She called me Daddy David, he told me later that evening, after everyone had gone home and we were cleaning up paper plates and balloon pieces. Is that okay? That's when I knew I was falling in love with him. We took things slowly, partly because I was scared of screwing up the best thing that had happened to me in years, and partly because David understood that Lily had to come first. He never pushed for more time than I could give, never complained when our dates got interrupted by teething or ear infections or the million other things that come with having a toddler. By the time Lily turned 2, we were officially together. By the time she turned 3, David had moved in with us, and just after her 4th birthday, he proposed in the same garden where we'd watched her take her first steps. My therapy practice had grown to the point where I was working with about 15 regular clients, mostly teenagers dealing with family issues, anxiety, and depression. I was making around $85,000 a year between my private practice and some online counseling workshops I'd started offering. We'd renovated the kitchen, updated the bathroom, and added a deck off the back of the house where we could have coffee in the mornings while Lily played in the garden. Life was good. Really genuinely good for the first time since, maybe ever. That's why the phone call from Marcus, coming out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning in October, felt so jarring. His voice came through my phone like he'd talked to me yesterday instead of not at all for 4 years. I've been thinking about you. I was sitting in my home office between clients, and the sound of his voice made my coffee taste suddenly bitter. Marcus, I said, not quite believing it. Is everything okay? Is someone hurt? No, everyone's fine, he said quickly. I've been thinking about family lately, about how long it's been since we've talked. I waited for the catch, because there had to be one. Marcus didn't call to chat. I saw your website, he continued. Healing Roots Counseling? Really impressive, Em. Mom and Dad would be so proud if they knew how well you're doing. Would they? I asked, not bothering to hide my skepticism. Of course they would. You're their daughter. We all made mistakes, but that's in the past now. Families should stick together, right? Over the next 20 minutes, Marcus painted a picture of a family that had somehow realized their mistakes and wanted to reconnect. He talked about missing me, about wanting to meet Lily, about how much our parents regretted the way things had ended. He also mentioned, almost casually, that things had been challenging for everyone lately. The construction business has been tough since the recession, he said. Dad had to close the company last year, and Mom's been dealing with some health issues, had to take extended leave from teaching. Plus my divorce was, expensive. There it was. I'm sorry to hear all that, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want my family to be struggling. Yeah, that's life, right? Ups and downs. But the important thing is family. I was thinking we could come visit next weekend, maybe? See your place, meet Lily, just reconnect. I should have said no. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to end the call and block the number. But there was still a part of me, apparently, that wanted to believe my family could change. That wanted Lily to have grandparents and an uncle who loved her. One weekend, I said. Saturday to Sunday. We have plans Sunday evening, so it can't go late. Perfect, Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. We'll see you Saturday morning. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at my phone. David found me there an hour later when he came home from the hospital. You look like someone died, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. What's wrong? I told him about the call, about my family wanting to visit. David listened without interrupting, but I could see the concern growing in his expression. Are you sure about this? He asked when I finished. It's been 4 years, Emma. 4 years without so much as a birthday card. Why now? Maybe people change, I said, though I didn't sound convinced even to myself. Maybe, David said. Or maybe they heard through the grapevine about your success and figured it was time to play nice. I knew he was probably right, but I also knew I had to find out for sure. I'd spent so many years wondering if my family could ever accept me, love me the way I was. If there was even a small chance, didn't I owe it to Lily to try? That Saturday, at exactly 10 a.m., I watched my dad's pickup truck pull into my driveway. It was older than I remembered, with rust spots around the wheel wells and a dent in the tailgate. My parents climbed out first, moving more slowly than I expected, followed by Marcus from the passenger side. They all looked older, smaller somehow. My dad's hair was completely gray now, and he'd lost weight. My mom was wearing a sweater I recognized from my high school years, and her smile seemed forced when she saw me standing on the porch. Marcus looked the most changed. He was thinner, his clothes were wrinkled like he'd slept in them, and there was something in his eyes that reminded me of clients I'd worked with who were struggling with addiction or depression. "Emma," my mom called out, walking toward me with her arms outstretched. "Look at you. You look wonderful, honey." The hug felt awkward, like embracing a stranger, but I tried to relax into it. Behind her, my dad was studying the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This place looks fantastic," he said, coming up the front steps. "You've put a lot of work into it." "Thank you," I said. "Come on in, I'll give you the tour." Lily was in the living room, playing with her blocks when we walked in, and she immediately hid behind my legs when she saw the strangers. "Lily," I said gently, "these are Mommy's family. This is Grandma Linda and Grandpa Robert, and this is Uncle Marcus." My mom immediately dropped to her knees, her voice taking on that overly sweet tone adults use with children they don't know. "Hi there, sweetheart. I'm your grandma. I've been waiting so long to meet you." Lily pressed closer to my legs and didn't respond. "She's shy with new people," I explained. "Give her some time." As I showed them around the house, I noticed Marcus paying unusual attention to details that seemed odd for someone just getting reacquainted. He asked about the property taxes, commented on how much the renovations must have cost, and seemed particularly interested in the size of each room. 3 bedrooms, he said as we stood in the hallway. "That's a lot of space for just you and Lily." "We like having room to spread out," I replied. "My office is in the smallest bedroom, and we use the third one as a playroom." "Must be expensive to heat a place this size," my dad commented, running his hand along the original woodwork. "These old houses can be money pits." "It's manageable," I said, starting to feel defensive. "The new heating system is very efficient." During lunch, my parents and Marcus took turns catching me up on their lives. My dad's construction company had indeed failed after several large clients defaulted on payments. Mom's health issues were apparently stress-related anxiety and depression that had gotten bad enough to require medication and time off work. Marcus's divorce had been finalized the year before, and he'd lost the house in the settlement. "Sarah got everything," Marcus said bitterly. "The house, half my retirement, and I'm still paying her alimony, plus my gambling debts." That was the first mention of gambling, and it explained the hollow look in his eyes. "We're all staying together now," my mom said, shooting Marcus a warning look. "In a nice little apartment near downtown Phoenix. It's cozy." Cozy was clearly code for too small, but I didn't comment. Throughout the afternoon, I noticed my family members stepping away to take phone calls or text messages. Marcus disappeared into the bathroom for nearly 15 minutes at one point, and when he came back, I could have sworn I saw his phone's camera app closing as he slipped it into his pocket. The weekend ended without any major incidents, but I was left with an uneasy feeling I couldn't shake. David had been polite but distant with my family, and after they left, he voiced what I'd been trying not to think. "Did you notice your brother taking pictures?" he asked as we cleaned up from dinner. "Pictures. Of every room in the house. I saw him do it in the kitchen, the living room, and definitely in your office. And your parents kept asking weird questions about property values and maintenance costs." I wanted to dismiss his concerns, but I couldn't ignore what I'd seen too. "Maybe they're just curious. It's been years since they've seen how I live." "Maybe," David said, but he didn't sound convinced. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call that proved David's instincts had been right. I was in the middle of a therapy session with one of my teenage clients when my phone rang. I normally never answer during sessions, but the caller ID showed it was from my bank, and something made me excuse myself. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is Jennifer from Rocky Mountain Credit Union," the voice on the other end said. "We received some documents today regarding a property transfer for your house at 1847 Maple Street, and there are some discrepancies we need to discuss." My heart stopped. "What kind of property transfer?" I asked, stepping out onto my back deck where my client couldn't hear. "According to the documents we received, you're transferring ownership of your property to a Marcus Rodriguez, but the signature doesn't quite match what we have on file, and some of the notarization looks irregular. We wanted to confirm this is legitimate before processing." I felt like I was going to throw up. "I never signed any property transfer," I said, my voice shaking. Someone is trying to steal my house. An hour later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office with copies of the forged documents spread across his desk. The paperwork was sophisticated. Official forms, fake notary stamps, and a signature that looked remarkably close to mine, but wasn't quite right. "This is fraud," my lawyer said simply. "Criminal fraud. You need to call the police." But first, I called Marcus. "Hey, Em, what's up?" His voice was casual, like he hadn't just tried to steal my house. "I know what you did," I said without preamble. "The bank called me about the property transfer." There was a long silence before Marcus spoke again. And when he did, his voice was completely different. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The forged documents, Marcus, with my forged signature. The bank has them right now, along with your fake notary stamp." Another silence then. "That house should belong to the family, not just you." "It's my house," I shouted, not caring that I was standing in my lawyer's hallway. "Grandma Rose left it to me." "You abandoned us," Marcus said, his voice getting louder too. "You cut us out of your life, refused to help when we needed you, and now you're sitting in that big house all by yourself while your own parents are struggling to make rent." "I abandoned you?" I could barely get the words out. "You told me I don't even have a family. You refused to help me when I was homeless and pregnant." "That was different. You made bad choices, and choices have consequences. But this house, it's worth more than Dad will ever see in retirement. It's wasted on you." "Get out of my life, Marcus," I said, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "All of you. And if you ever try anything like this again, I'm calling the police." I hung up, but I knew this wasn't over. That night, after David had put Lily to bed and we were sitting on our back deck, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible even a year earlier. "I'm driving to Phoenix tomorrow," I told him. "I'm going to confront them face to face with the evidence of what they tried to do." "Emma, that's not safe," David said immediately. "If they're desperate enough to forge legal documents, who knows what else they're capable of?" "I can't just let this go," I said. "They tried to steal my house, David. The house Grandma Rose left for me and Lily. If I don't stand up to them now, they'll keep trying." David studied my face in the porch light, and I could see him recognizing something there that meant I'd already made up my mind. "Then I'm coming with you," he said. "No," I said immediately. "I need you to stay with Lily. This is something I have to do alone." The next morning, I loaded copies of all the forged documents into my car and started the 2-hour drive to Phoenix. The closer I got to my parents' apartment complex, the more my hands shook on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, to let the lawyers handle everything from a distance. But I thought about Lily and about the house Grandma Rose had left us, and about all the years I'd spent being afraid of my own family. I was done being afraid. The apartment complex where my parents now lived was nothing like the neighborhood I'd grown up in. The buildings were old, the parking lot was cracked, and several of the mailboxes were hanging open with their contents spilling out. I found their unit number and knocked on the door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the neighbors could hear it. My dad opened the door, and for a split second, I saw surprise cross his face before it hardened into something cold. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, holding up the manila folder with the documents. "All of us, right now." He hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The apartment was tiny, probably less than 800 square feet, with furniture I recognized from my childhood crammed into spaces too small to hold it properly. My mom was sitting on the couch folding laundry, and Marcus was at a small kitchen table with his laptop open. They all looked up when I walked in, and the guilt on their faces told me everything I needed to know. "We need to talk," I said again, setting the folder on the coffee table. "About these." I opened the folder and spread the forged documents across the table. The fake property transfer, the forged signature, the phony notary documentation. All of it. "Explain this," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "Explain to me how my signature ended up on papers I never signed." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "Emma, you have to understand our situation," he began. "We're struggling here. Your mother can't work full-time anymore. I don't have a business, and Marcus is drowning in debt from his divorce. So you decided to steal my house." "It's not stealing," my mom said, her voice rising. That house has been in the family for generations. Your grandmother should have left it to all of us, not just you." "But she didn't," I said, my own voice getting louder. "She left it to me because she knew I was the only one who would appreciate it and take care of it." Marcus stood up from the kitchen table, his laptop closing with a sharp snap. "You don't deserve that house," he said, walking toward me. "You disappeared from this family for years. You didn't visit Grandma Rose when she was sick. You didn't call when Dad's business failed. You didn't even send a card when I got divorced." "I didn't visit Grandma because I was working 3 jobs trying to survive after you all abandoned me when I needed help," I shot back. "And I didn't know about Dad's business or your divorce because none of you bothered to tell me. You made it very clear I wasn't part of this family anymore." "That's not true," my mother said, but her voice wavered. "We always loved you, Emma. We couldn't support choices that we thought would hurt you." "Hurt me?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You turned away your pregnant daughter who was asking for help. You said I didn't even have a family. How exactly was that supposed to protect me?" Marcus took another step toward me, and something in his expression had changed. He looked cornered, desperate. "None of that matters now," he said. "What matters is that we need this house more than you do. You're one person, Emma. We're a whole family." "I have a family too," I said. "I have Lily and David and—" "Some guy you've been dating for 2 years isn't family," Marcus interrupted. "And one kid doesn't make you more deserving of a 3-bedroom house than 3 adults who are about to be evicted." "You're about to be evicted." My parents exchanged glances, and my mother started crying. "We're 3 months behind on rent," she admitted. "Your father's unemployment ran out, and my disability payments aren't enough to cover everything. The landlord gave us until the end of the month." For a moment, I felt the old familiar tug of guilt and responsibility. These were my parents, my brother. They were struggling, and I had resources that could help them. Then I remembered the forged documents on the coffee table. "So instead of asking for help, you decided to steal my house," I said. "You figured if you could just transfer the ownership to Marcus, you could all move in, and I couldn't do anything about it." "It wouldn't have been stealing," my dad said defensively. "We would have let you stay. There's plenty of room." "Let me stay? In my own house?" "It would have been Marcus's house," my mother corrected. "But of course you and Lily would always have a place there. We're family." The audacity of it took my breath away. They'd literally tried to steal my home and then planned to graciously allow me to continue living there as their guest. "You're insane," I said, starting to gather up the documents. "All of you. You're completely insane if you think I would ever—" Marcus suddenly lunged forward and grabbed my wrist, trying to snatch the papers out of my hands. "Give me those," he said, his grip tight enough to hurt. "Those documents are private." "Let go of me," I said, trying to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Marcus, stop," my mother said, but she didn't move to help me. "Those papers could send me to jail," Marcus said, his face inches from mine. "You're not taking them anywhere." "Let go of me right now," I said again, pulling harder. Instead of releasing me, Marcus shoved me backward, hard. I stumbled, trying to catch myself, and slammed into the wall behind me. My shoulder hit the corner of a picture frame, and a sharp pain shot down my arm. Something snapped inside me. I pushed myself off the wall and slapped Marcus across the face as hard as I could. The sound echoed through the small apartment like a gunshot. "Don't you ever touch me again," I said, my voice deadly quiet. Marcus raised his hand like he was going to hit me back, but my dad stepped between us. "Both of you, stop this right now," he said, but his voice shook. I bent down and scooped up the scattered documents, my shoulders screaming in pain. "I'm leaving," I said, heading toward the door. "I'm leaving," I said, heading toward the door with the documents clutched against my chest. "And I'm calling the police the second I get to my car." "Emma, wait," my mother called out, but I didn't stop. "Please, honey, let's talk about this like adults," my dad said, following me to the door. "We can work something out." I turned around in the doorway, looking at all 3 of them standing there in their cramped apartment with their desperate expressions and their complete lack of remorse for what they'd tried to do. "You want to work something out?" I said. "Here's what we're going to work out. You're going to stay away from me, stay away from my house, and stay away from my daughter. If any of you ever contact me again, if you ever come near my property, if you ever even drive down my street, I will have you arrested." "You can't mean that," my mother said, fresh tears streaming down her face. "We're family, Emma. Family doesn't call the police on family. Family doesn't forge signatures and assault each other either," I replied. But apparently, this family does. I drove home in a haze of adrenaline and rage, my shoulder throbbing where it had hit the wall. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made several decisions that would have seemed impossible even that morning. David took one look at my face when I walked through the door and immediately sent Lily to play in her room. "What happened?" he asked, gently examining my shoulder where my shirt was torn. I told him everything. The confrontation, the admission about the eviction, Marcus grabbing me, the shove, the slap. When I finished, David was quiet for a long moment. "We're calling the police," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "I already decided that on the drive home." The next few hours were a blur of police reports, photographs of my torn shirt and bruised shoulder, and phone calls with my lawyer. The police took the fraud charges seriously, especially when they saw the sophistication of the forged documents. They also filed assault charges against Marcus for shoving me. "Ma'am, this isn't just a family dispute," the investigating officer told me as we sat in my living room. "This is criminal fraud and assault. These charges could result in jail time." Within 48 hours, Marcus was arrested at my parents' apartment. The local news even picked up the story. Phoenix man arrested for attempting to steal sister's house through forged documents. My parents called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer any of the calls. The phone calls continued for weeks. My mother left increasingly desperate voicemails, begging me to drop the charges, explaining that Marcus couldn't go to jail because he was already struggling with depression and gambling addiction. My father left angry messages accusing me of destroying the family over a misunderstanding. I didn't return any of their calls, but I did save every voicemail. My lawyer said they might be useful if my parents tried to claim harassment or contact violations later. The legal process took months. Marcus eventually pled guilty to charges of fraud and assault in exchange for a lighter sentence. He was sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, a $10,000 fine, and mandatory counseling for gambling addiction and anger management. He was also ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my property at all times. A permanent restraining order was issued against all 3 of them, legally preventing them from contacting me or coming near my house. Throughout the court proceedings, my parents continued to insist that I was overreacting, that family should be able to work things out privately. They seemed genuinely unable to understand that what Marcus had done was a serious crime, not just a family disagreement that got out of hand. The only time I saw any hint of real remorse was during Marcus's sentencing hearing, when my mother broke down sobbing in the courtroom. "I'm so sorry, Emma," she cried out as the bailiff led Marcus away. "We never meant for it to go this far. We just didn't know what else to do." But even then, she was apologizing for getting caught, not for what they'd tried to do. The whole experience left me emotionally drained in ways I hadn't expected. I started seeing a therapist myself, someone who specialized in family trauma and estrangement. It was strange being on the other side of the therapeutic relationship, but I needed help processing the betrayal and the guilt I still felt about pressing charges. "You did the right thing," my therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, told me during one of our sessions. "What they did wasn't desperate family members making a mistake. It was calculated criminal behavior. They researched property transfer laws, created false documents, and planned to deceive you and the bank. That takes premeditation." "But they're still my family," I said. "My parents are probably going to lose their apartment because of the legal fees." "Emma, Dr. Martinez said gently, "Your parents lost their apartment because they chose to support their son's criminal behavior instead of getting jobs or asking for help in legal ways. Their consequences are the result of their choices, not yours." It took months of therapy to really accept that truth. During this time, something beautiful was happening in the rest of my life. David and I got married in a small ceremony in Grandma Rose's garden, with Lily as our flower girl and Mrs. Patterson as my matron of honor. My college roommate flew in from Seattle to be my maid of honor, and David's parents and siblings embraced me and Lily like we'd always been part of their family. For the first time in my life, I experienced what a healthy, supportive family looked like. David's parents never asked intrusive questions about my finances or my parenting choices. They never compared me to David's sister or made comments about what I should be doing differently. They just loved me and Lily, unconditionally and without strings attached. 6 months after the wedding, I found out I was pregnant again. This pregnancy was completely different from my experience with Lily. Instead of facing it alone and terrified, I had David holding my hand at every doctor's appointment and Lily excitedly planning what she wanted to teach her little brother or sister. We decided to name the baby Robert if it was a boy, after my grandfather who had died when I was young, but who Grandma Rose always said was the kindest man she'd ever known. If it was a girl, we'd name her Rose, after the woman who'd given me the foundation to build my life on. As my pregnancy progressed, my therapy practice continued to grow. Word had spread about my specialization in family estrangement and trauma, and I was getting referrals from other therapists across the state. I started writing a blog called Healing Without Them, sharing my experiences and insights about creating healthy boundaries with toxic family members. The blog took off in ways I never expected. Within 6 months, I had over 50,000 subscribers, mostly people who were dealing with their own family estrangement situations. I started getting invited to speak at conferences and workshops about family trauma and recovery. My story resonated with so many people who'd been told that family should always come first, no matter how badly they treated you. People who'd been guilted into maintaining relationships with parents or siblings who consistently hurt them. People who'd been made to feel like there was something wrong with them for wanting to protect themselves from family members, who saw them as sources of money, labor, or emotional supply, rather than as human beings deserving of love and respect. When baby Robert was born, healthy and perfect, David and I made a decision that would have shocked my younger self. We decided not to notify my parents or Marcus about his birth. They had forfeited their right to be part of our children's lives when they chose criminality over love. Lily was an amazing big sister from day one, helping with diaper changes and singing lullabies she made up herself. Watching her gentle interactions with Robert, I felt grateful every day that she would grow up in a family where love wasn't conditional on performance or compliance. About a year after Robert was born, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from my mother, handwritten on floral stationery I remembered from my childhood. "Emma," it began. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I had to try one more time. I've been going to counseling since Marcus's trial, trying to understand how everything went so wrong. I realize now that we failed you in ways I never acknowledged before. We were so focused on Marcus and his problems that we forgot you were our child too, deserving of the same love and support we gave him. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I know we don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see now how badly we hurt you, not just with the house situation, but throughout your whole life. You deserved better parents than we were. I hope you're happy. And I hope your children never have to question whether their mother loves them the way you had to question ours. Love, Mom." I read the letter 3 times before showing it to David. "What do you think?" I asked him. "I think it sounds sincere," he said carefully. "But I also think sincere regret doesn't undo attempted fraud and assault." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." I thought about the letter for several days before deciding what to do. In the end, I wrote back a short response. "Mom, I appreciate your letter and your acknowledgement of the harm that was done. I'm glad you're getting help, and I hope it brings you peace. However, I'm not ready for contact right now, and I don't know if I ever will be. My children and I are safe and happy, which is what matters most to me. I wish you well in your healing journey. Emma." I never heard back from her, which was probably for the best. Meanwhile, my professional life continued to expand in exciting ways. I was invited to write a book about family estrangement and recovery, which became a bestseller and led to a national speaking tour. The book, titled "When Blood Isn't Enough: Building the Family You Deserve," struck a chord with readers who'd been struggling with toxic family relationships. I used some of the proceeds from the book to establish a foundation that provided legal aid to people dealing with family fraud and financial abuse. Too many people were trapped in abusive family relationships because they couldn't afford lawyers to protect themselves from relatives who saw them as walking ATMs or free labor. The foundation's first case was helping a young man whose parents had taken out credit cards in his name and run up $30,000 in debt while he was away at college. The second case involved a woman whose siblings were trying to force her to sell the family home she'd inherited so they could split the proceeds, even though she was caring for their disabled mother in that home. Every case reminded me how lucky I was to have had the resources and support system needed to fight back when my own family tried to victimize me. Now, 3 years later, I'm sitting in the garden Grandma Rose planted, watching Lily push Robert on the tire swing David installed last summer. My therapy practice is thriving, my marriage is strong, and my children are growing up knowing they're loved exactly as they are. I still think about my parents sometimes, especially my mother. I wonder if she's still in counseling, if she's learned to see Marcus's problems clearly instead of enabling them, if she's found peace in her life. I hope she has, but from a distance. People sometimes ask me if I regret pressing charges, if I wish I'd handled things differently. The answer is no. What my family did to me wasn't a misunderstanding or a desperate mistake. It was a calculated attempt to steal my home and my security, and it came after years of emotional abuse and neglect. I learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation, and that protecting yourself and your children from people who've proven they'll hurt you isn't cruel, it's necessary. I also learned that family isn't defined by shared DNA or legal obligations. Family is defined by consistent love, respect, and support. David's parents, who've never missed one of Lily's school plays or Robert's doctor appointments, are more family to me than the people who share my last name, but couldn't be bothered to help when I was pregnant and alone. Mrs. Patterson, who brings homemade cookies every Sunday and babysits whenever David and I need a date night, is more family to me than the brother who tried to steal my house. My clients, who trust me with their deepest traumas and celebrate my successes like they're their own, are more family to me than the parents who said I didn't even have a family. The house Grandma Rose left me has become exactly what she intended it to be, a foundation for building something beautiful and strong. Not just the physical structure, but the life I've created within its walls. Every room holds memories of Lily's first steps, Robert's first words, quiet mornings with David over coffee, evenings in the garden with friends who've become chosen family. This house isn't just where I live. It's proof that I deserve to take up space in the world all along. It's proof that the little girl who was told her dreams were too big and her ambitions were unrealistic was wrong to believe those voices. It's proof that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most are the ones least capable of seeing who you really are. But most importantly, it's proof that you can build a beautiful life even when, especially when, you have to build it from scratch. If you're watching this and you're dealing with toxic family members who make you question your worth, who tell you that you're being dramatic or ungrateful for wanting to be treated with basic respect, I want you to know something. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm, even if those people are related to you. You don't owe anyone your peace, your security, or your children's safety just because you share DNA with them. You don't owe anyone access to your life, your home, or your resources just because they raised you or because they're struggling. Love isn't supposed to hurt. Family isn't supposed to be something you have to survive. And if the people in your life are treating you like an ATM instead of a human being, it's okay to close the account. I know how scary it is to set boundaries with family members, especially when they've trained you to believe that their needs matter more than your safety. I know how guilty it feels to prioritize your own well-being over their convenience. I know how isolating it can be when people tell you that family is family, and you should just forgive and forget. But I also know how peaceful life becomes when you surround yourself with people who see your value instead of just your usefulness. I know how much energy you have for building beautiful things when you're not constantly defending yourself from people who are supposed to love you. I know how much easier it is to be a good parent when you're not trying to heal from the damage your own parents did. You deserve to be loved without conditions. You deserve to be supported without strings attached. You deserve to build a life that feels safe and peaceful and joyful. And if the family you were born into can't give you those things, it's not just okay to find or create a family that can. It's necessary. Your real family is out there waiting for you. Sometimes it's friends who become sisters, partners who become home, neighbors who become grandparents to your children, communities that celebrate your successes and support you through your struggles. Your real family is the people who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. The people who see you as a gift to be treasured, not a burden to be managed. The people who make you feel more like yourself when you're with them, not less. Build that family, invest in those relationships, protect that peace, and remember, the people who truly love you will never punish you for having boundaries. They'll respect them, support them, and probably wonder why it took you so long to set them. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're dealing with a similar situation, please know that you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you're not wrong for wanting better. The family you deserve is out there. Sometimes you just have to be brave enough to go find them.